They never thought it would come to this. But today, the unflappable Kody Brown just crashed into the wall. He never saw coming. The courtroom was silent as a tomb, the air thick with expectation. Kody Brown, the man who made his fortune as the patriarch of the Sister Wives franchise, stood rigidly at the defense table. His jaw was clenched, his fingers interwoven like he could squeeze the issue away. And then there were the words that would blow his world to smithereens. Effective immediately, the court orders all assets owned by Kody Brown to be frozen pending further investigation. It was like the crack of hammer against glass. Gasp after gasp spread through the room. Robyn's face went pale. Christine and Janelle shared a look, half dismay, half triumph. And within that one instant, the dynamics of the Brown family changed forever. For years, Kody has been the self-assured, on-top-of-things patriarch, managing 4 wives, dozens of children, and the crazy demands of plural family life. But behind closed doors, rumors of money woes and fairness have been growing louder. Christine and Janelle had for years alleged that Kody gave financial priority to Robyn's household, forcing others to get by on tight budgets. Property buys, lavish purchases, and business expenses tended to favor one side of the family, while the others sat on the sidelines. And now, the court was getting involved. It began with accusations, charges that Kody had been transferring money from personal to business accounts, to shield it from being split or claimed in bitter battles. It was sufficient to raise some eyebrows. Quickly, an official probe ensued. Financial sleuths combed through all transactions, all deeds to property, all banking statements. The further they searched, the more discrepancies they reported. Although Kody's representatives denied any impropriety, the judge was not taking any chances. The freeze was an extra precaution to prevent any sudden transfers or secret withdrawals until the case resolved itself. The decision had one meaning: Kody was no longer in control of his own money. No major expenditures, no cash transactions, no real estate sales. Each dollar was frozen, and every expense now needed court permission. For someone like Kody, who had spent years as the decision-maker and money-keeper, this was more than a legal defeat. It was a personal embarrassment. The courtroom cameras caught his response. A strained smile that swiftly relinquished its hold to a look of astonishment. He wasn't merely being called out. He was being denied the authority that had characterized his position in the family for many years. If Kody was upset, Robyn was terrified. She leaned over to him, whispering frantically. Friends who were close to the family later said she asked how they would maintain their house, pay bills, and fund their lifestyle expenses. For years, Robyn was Kody's closest confidant, the wife who always stood up for him, even in the most vile brawls. But money does change everything. And when the money stops flowing, even the strongest of alliances can begin to erode. At the same time, Christine, who infamously left Kody, was caught whispering with Janelle what appeared suspiciously like a smile. For them, this wasn't a mere legal decision. It was a vindication after decades of feeling pushed aside and economically exploited. To appreciate this moment, you have to rewind. Throughout the years, the finances of the Brown family have remained an open sore. Every home, every property, every new business came with the question of who was footing the bill and who was profiting. Christine and Janelle both expressed resentments that Kody appeared to be more concerned with creating a luxurious lifestyle with Robyn, while they were struggling to survive. Even Meri, who tended to remain quiet, once suggested there were financial disagreements. The asset freeze didn't just happen. It was a culmination of years of accusations, suspicion, and resentment boiling over into a final breaking point. Freezing assets is not something a court will do on a whim. It is a severe measure that typically is used only if there is evidence, or at least reasonable suspicion, that money might be laundered or transferred before a case is over. Investigators allegedly uncovered patterns in Kody's finances that made them concerned about just that. Whether it was purposeful transfers, unexplained withdrawals, or transferring ownership of assets, it was enough to persuade the judge that emergency action was necessary. The outcome? Kody is immobilized. His bank accounts, properties, and even some investments are locked up tighter than Fort Knox until they get further notice. The freeze didn't only strike Kody, it sent shockwaves throughout the entire clan. Christine, remarried and on her own, has made it plenty clear she's moved on emotionally. But she also understands the importance of this decision. She and Janelle have fought for years to have things open up, and now the court was coercing them. Janelle, ever practical and serious about stability, views this as a potential turning point, a means of finally getting some answers about years of fiscal confusion. Meri, always the mystery, hasn't commented, but onlookers promise she looked lighter, even relieved. Maybe she realizes that with Kody's grip loosened, things are finally at last changeable. Robyn, however, is living a nightmare. With her and Kody's finances so interwoven, the freeze hits her home directly. Bills, mortgage payments, even everyday expenses are suddenly at risk. When the news flashed out on social media erupted. Viewers of Sister Wives who had watched the Browns for more than a decade were shocked by the outcome. Many felt it was poetic justice, retribution for years of perceived favoritism and condescension. Others sympathized, noting that this was a sad situation for the children caught in the middle. YouTubers, bloggers, and news sites quickly seized on the story. Every rumor, every courtroom whisper, every detail became headline news. Legally, the case might take months or even years to finally wrap up. If the investigation clears Kody, the freeze will be lifted, and he'll be in control of his assets again. But even if that happens, his reputation might already be irreparably damaged. If the court determines there was wrongdoing, Kody might pay steep monetary fines, lose property, and face additional lawsuits from those who feel they've been harmed. And then there's the issue of his relationships. Can Robyn be faithful if their lifestyle is severely diminished? Will Meri, Janelle, and Christine demand even more distance? Might this be the ultimate break that totally annihilates what's left of the Brown family dynamic? For so long, the identity of Kody Brown had been tied up in two things: his status as leader of a plural marriage and his dominance over family finances. Both of those have been coming apart, first when Christine left him, then when relationships with Janelle and Meri fell apart. And now, with finances out of his hands and under the control of the court, the final pillar of his dominance has fallen. The man who once commanded a sprawling family with confidence is now in a fight just to keep control of his own bank account. And the world is watching. If there's one thing we've learned from the Browns, it's that their drama doesn't fade quietly. Every court hearing will bring new revelations. Every interview with a family member could shift public opinion. And every step Kody takes from here forward will be questioned like never before. For his fans, this is an opportunity to clear his name. For his detractors, it's confirmation of all they've suspected anyway. Either way, what's certain is that Kody Brown's life will never be the same again after that gavel came down. The freeze on his assets is not simply a matter of dollars. It's about power, trust, and the future of a family that has been disintegrating before the eyes of millions of viewers. And now, the question is, when the dust settles, will Kody Brown be the man who rode out the storm, or the man who lost everything in the court of law and the court of public opinion? This changes everything. The words sliced through the courtroom's whispered tension like a razor. They weren't raised, but among the near silence that reigned after the judge's pronouncement, every ear heard them. Some claim it was Christine who breathed them. Others believe it was Janelle. But who cared? Because everybody in the room knew the truth. Everything would be different today. The judge's voice had remained firm, measured, almost serene when she handed down the decision. Effective immediately, the court orders the freezing of all financial assets of Mr. Kody Brown, subject to further investigation. It was a sentence that would change the direction of Kody Brown's life, his family's future, and perhaps even his legacy as the patriarch of one of reality TV's most well-known plural families. Ahead of time, the courtroom had seemed strangely tense, as if waiting for the before-storm quiet before a thunderstorm. Lawyers rustled papers. The bailiff's shoes clicked against the buffed floor. A handful of onlookers grumbled softly in the back seats. But everyone's attention continued to gravitate toward the guy sitting at the epicenter of it all. Kody Brown. He was attired in a black suit, a white shirt, and a tie that seemed just a bit too tight, as if it would strangle him if the incorrect words were uttered. His stance was stiff, almost challenging. Others claimed he wore the face of a man who anticipated victory. Others observed something else, a flash of uncertainty in his eyes, as if he understood the fight in store was one he could not entirely command. To his right was Robyn, hands crossed and knotted in her lap, knuckles pale. Her eyes darted back and forth, out to the judge's bench, then at Kody, as if wanting reassurance in the lines of his face. But Kody never glanced in her direction. His eyes remained fixed on the center of the courtroom, on the individual who now had the authority to determine his financial well-being. And then, it occurred. The judge's voice rang out, firm and absolute. All assets are to be frozen. You could practically sense the air being evacuated from the room. For an instant, no one stirred. No one said a word. It was as if the whole room had been put into stasis along with Kody's bank accounts. Christine's eyes grew wide, then narrowed. She leaned back in her chair, releasing a slow breath, as if she had waited decades for this moment. Janelle's lips together were set in what might have been a grim smile, or perhaps just an effort to contain her own response. Meri sat a few rows back, her face carefully blank. She didn't blink. She didn't fidget. But if you looked closely, you might have caught the faintest lift of one corner of her mouth. And Robyn? Robyn turned sharply toward Kody, whispering something urgent. Her voice was too low for the microphones to catch, but her body language said it all. She was rattled. Her fingers clutched Kody's sleeve as if she were attempting to anchor herself in a feeling of free fall. To grasp the shock of this instant, you must grasp Kody Brown's background. For decades, he's been the decider, the one who made the choices, not only in relationships, but in money. For the Brown family, money wasn't merely about bills and bank balances. It was power, influence, and control over the whole family dynamic. As long as Kody had the money, he had the upper hand. He chose where they lived, how they spent money, and what projects were financed. That authority was part of who he was, part of what kept him at the center of the family even as emotional fissures started to develop. But now, in a single stroke of the gavel, the court had taken that away. It wasn't dollars and cents. It was about stripping one of the final tools Kody had to keep him in the position of being the head of the family. The crowd, composed of reporters, legal spectators, and a couple of curious locals, responded with immediate shock. A sudden catch of breath from somewhere to the left, a whispered, "Oh my God," from the back. Pens began scratching wildly as reporters struggled to get the picture. One journalist leaned over and whispered to another, "This is bigger than we anticipated. He's not in trouble, he's cornered." Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat and cleared his throat. For a moment, he tried to pull a small smirk, as if to say, "Don't worry about this." But the smirk didn't quite make it to his eyes. His attorney leaned over and talked quickly and quietly, pointing at the paperwork on the table. Kody nodded, his movements stiff, almost robotic. He was aware of cameras, literal and metaphorical, being trained on him. Every hint of weakness would be beamed into millions of homes, but no amount of rehearsed calm could mask that his hold on the situation was ebbing away. For Christine, this was vindication. She had been outspoken privately and publicly about feeling economically pushed aside for years. Seeing Kody lose control of the properties felt, to her, like a leveler. Janelle, by nature more quiet, didn't rub it in, but her eyes had a look of steadiness. She realized this decision could open doors. Doors to openness, to equity, perhaps to winning back what she sensed she'd put in, but never received in full measure in return. Robyn reacted differently. Panic crossed her face. She wasn't concerned with vindication or justice. She was concerned with survival. Her house, her rent, the needs of her children, all of it had been maintained by the economic framework Kody ran. With the framework now under lock and key from the court, she was facing uncertainty she wasn't ready for. Her soft-spoken interrogations of Kody became more frantic. How long would the freeze continue? Would they still be able to use joint accounts? And the mortgage? Kody wasn't responding. at least not in a manner that comforted her. Having given the decision, the judge proceeded hastily, dictating the legal processes that would ensue. But for the Browns, the session was over in a haze. The headline was already drawn: Kody Brown's assets frozen by court order. By the time the gavel fell to end the hearing, the room was abuzz with rumors. What did the investigators learn? Was this only the tip of the iceberg? Exiting the courthouse was a show in itself. Newspaper people shouted questions. Kody, do you have a comment? Robyn, how is this going to impact your family? Christine, is this what you were seeking? Kody kept his eyes straight ahead, jaw clenched, ignoring them all. Robyn brought up the rear, holding her bag like it contained the secrets. Christine and Janelle strolled out together, their faces serene but inscrutable. Meri slipped quietly out, dodging the crowd altogether. In a matter of hours, the news was all over the internet. Sister Wives fans illuminated social media with opinions. Some were appalled, some were delighted, and some claimed to have been expecting it for years. Entertainment blogs and YouTube channels produced videos and stories analyzing every aspect, every expression on their faces in that courtroom. The court's ruling wasn't merely a legal issue. It was a milestone in the family's long-standing drama that had already been unfolding in the public eye. For Kody, the day the assets were frozen was the first time in a very long while he wasn't in charge. For his wives, current and former, it was the first time they witnessed the legal system intervene, where family relationships had gone awry. And for the audience, it was just the first chapter in what was shaping up to be a dramatic, unpredictable war over money, power, and allegiance. And with the courthouse doors closing behind him, Kody Brown stepped into a future that was not even remotely like the one he envisioned. A future in which for the first time his power had a lock on it, and the key was in someone else's possession. When the judge issued the freeze on Kody Brown's assets, the scene didn't simply leave off with gasps in the courtroom. It created ripples, shockwaves, across the whole legal and personal landscape of his life. And just as with a real earthquake, the destruction was only just beginning to come clear. Most court decisions don't suddenly spring up out of nothing. They build gradually, layer by layer, piece by piece, until the evidence is strong enough to compel action. In Kody's situation, the rumors first surfaced months before. Attorneys for some family members had started to ask questions. Where exactly was the money going? Externally, Kody consistently held up the image of a man who was stretched thin, but holding it together. But in private, questions continued to stack up. Why were some family properties suddenly put into other names? Why did joint account money appear to disappear on the eve of significant legal deadlines? And why did so many financial choices seem to benefit one household over the others? They wrote these off as typical drama in a plural marriage. Complex families tend to have complex finances. Others weren't so convinced. The change came when bank statements and title documents started to indicate patterns. Large amounts transferred from personal to business accounts. Properties sold and then rebought under other names. Loans that didn't correlate with income reported. Were these mere sloppy bookkeeping practices, or was there a deliberate attempt to transfer funds beyond reach before it could be divided or claimed? To the judge, it didn't have to make sense yet. What was important was the risk. And the danger was clear. If nothing were done, millions would vanish before the court could even render a final ruling. Judges don't care for surprises, particularly in cases involving money. When they notice a pattern indicating that funds may be transferred, concealed, or spent before a disagreement is resolved, they have an effective tool to use: the asset freeze. It's a legal grenade. Once it's triggered, all activity ceases. Bank accounts locked, properties blocked from sale, investments untouchable. This is not done lightly. It's a step normally taken for high-risk situations where the stakes are monumental. And here, the stakes were as high as they get. Kody quotes some lawyer had attempted to forestall the freeze order. He maintained that there was no evidence of wrongdoing, that Kody had every right to transfer his own funds, and that freezing assets would be unfairly penalizing him before any wrongdoing had been established. But the judge was not swayed. "Mr. Brown, this is not in punishment," she told him. "It is a safeguard to make sure that when this court renders its final judgment, there is something remaining to divide or to restore." Kody shrugged in his chair, arms folded across his chest. The case was over before it was argued. When the freeze order became official, the mood changed in an instant. Journalists started scribbling frantically. Fans murmured, trying to figure out what this did for the Brown dynasty. Members of the family soaked in the fact that Kody was no longer the only keeper of the funds that had been at the center of so much conflict. It wasn't merely a denial of access, it was a denial of control. And for years, financial conflicts had been the unspoken undertow in the family's drama. Christine had publicly aired feeling marginalized. Janelle had griped at the way resources were distributed. And even Meri, while less vocal, had suggested that fiscal priorities and the vows of promise weren't always aligned. The freeze was a moment of validation for some, and one of panic for others. Christine, sitting in her seat, was poised, almost serene. It was the first time she had witnessed a legal recognition that her fears were legitimate. Janelle's response was more subdued, but she too grasped the implications. If the money was controlled by the court, there would be at last transparency, something she'd battled for quietly for years. And then there was Robyn. Her expression spoke of someone coming to the realization that the safety net she had been counting on could be lost. She wasn't merely Kody's lawfully wedded wife. She was his most intimate financial collaborator. The freeze did not just affect him, it affected her family directly. In the Brown family, power had always been Kody's true currency. When news of the ruling went viral, responses erupted. A few of his fans applauded, declaring it was long overdue. Others were concerned with the children and how they would be taken care of should Kody's money be frozen. By the afternoon, YouTube channels, entertainment websites, and even mainstream news organizations were analyzing the choice. Financial experts broke down what an asset freeze entailed. Family drama pundits speculated regarding what it implied for the sister-wives situation. The show had crossed over from reality television. It was a live legal thriller unfolding in the public forum. An asset freeze is sometimes referred to as the nuclear option in financial conflicts, because it brings everything to a standstill. It's meant to avoid the vanishing of assets overnight, yet it exerts tremendous pressure upon the individual whose money is frozen. Kody couldn't spend a lot of money. He couldn't sell real estate. He couldn't buy large things without approval from the court. Every financial decision was now watched. This type of legal limitation is embarrassing for someone who's used to making the rules. And for Kody, a man who'd built his persona on being the decision maker, it was a direct hit to his image and ego. Sources close to the family later revealed that after the hearing, Kody and Robyn had a tense, whispered exchange in a courthouse hallway. Robyn wanted to know how they would pay immediate expenses. Kody reportedly told her, "We'll figure it out," but the strain in his voice was unmistakable. Christine and Janelle departed together, evading the press. Meri exited through a side door. They all had no need to say anything. The judge's decision had said it all. The freeze wasn't the end, only the beginning. Now investigators would search every transaction of Kody's finances, every transfer, every expenditure, every transaction. If there were sound reasons, they would be revealed. If there were suspicious ones, the repercussions could be dire. For Kody, the battle was twofold. Battle to unfreeze his money, shield what was remaining of his reputation in the process. For the other Browns, the freeze was an opportunity to finally get a glimpse of what had been going on behind the financial veil. Legally speaking, the freeze was simply one of many orders issued. But in family speak, it was seismic. For years, power had been weighted heavily in Kody's favor. Now the court had swooped in and weighted it in the other direction, permanently perhaps. And like the earthquake itself, the aftershocks would continue. There would be additional hearings, additional evidence, additional headlines, and each step would strip away one more layer of the family's carefully built facade. When the gavel came down on the judge's bench, it didn't just seal a court decision. It marked the crumbling of the economic underpinning that had propped up Kody's leadership. The man who once decided everything from housing to holiday budgets was now in the same position as the wives who had once asked him for money, waiting for someone else to say yes. For a man like Kody Brown, that wasn't just inconvenient, it was earth-shattering. The courtroom hardly settled after the judge's bombshell declaration. When the first telltale fissures started appearing, Kody Brown continued to sit rigidly, eyes directly ahead, nearly refusing to blink. as if looking away from anyone would somehow render the moment unreal. But to his right, Robyn Brown was disintegrating. Her carefully put-together look, a belted navy blazer, hair curled to set off her face, was giving way to panicked whispers and racing glances. She leaned in close to Kody, her words inaudible but her desperation unreadable. "What are we going to do?" she mouthed, her fingers digging into his arm. This was not merely a bad day in court for Robyn. For her, this decision hit at the very epicenter of the stability of her life. She and Kody had enjoyed a financial arrangement that, by accounts of erstwhile family members, put her household at the fulcrum of the family's spending. Mortgage payments, children's school bills, vacations, renovating. They had always appeared to have more money than the rest. Now, all of it was locked in a momentous gavel fall. Rupper. Quote's terror wasn't very subtle. Her eyes paled, and she continued to look in the direction of the clerk's desk, as if waiting for someone to come over and explain to her. This was all a big misunderstanding. Kody attempted to calm her, putting his hand over hers, but even that motion felt unsteady. He wasn't only comforting her, he was comforting himself. The other wives, both present and past, watched each passing second of this. Janelle's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a small sign that she was drinking in every last detail. Christine, sitting mere feet away, wore the sort of tranquil smile that seemed to border on satisfaction. And Meri, she remained motionless, lips drawn back in a hard line, but her gaze revealed something different. She was observing Robyn's fear with a silent fascination, as if she'd been expecting this for many years. Robyn has been characterized, accurately or inaccurately, since years ago, as Kody's favorite, not only emotionally, but financially. Ex-Sister Wives viewers have broken down scenes from the series, highlighting instances in which money was shifted toward Robyn's expenses, while Janelle and Christine were instructed to wait until we can afford it, or be patient. When the court ordered the freeze, it wasn't only Kody's funds that were frozen, it was every family expense, every account at every bank linked to him, every asset over which he had control. For Robyn, that meant no new financial moves without court approval. If her children needed something expensive, if her house needed repairs, if she wanted to buy even a moderate-sized item, it would have to wait. And for a person who had grown used to having Kody's resources and attention devoted to her family, the sudden loss of that security was horrifying. In direct contrast, Janelle and Christine appeared serene, perhaps even quietly victorious. For years, they'd expressed concerns about how money was managed in the family, but those talks would typically end with Kody justifying his decisions or dismissing them. Janelle had been frugal when it came to money, usually budgeting for herself carefully and sacrificing when the family pool of money was going elsewhere. Christine, by contrast, had expressed frustration aloud at being pushed aside, especially in the later years prior to her departure from the marriage. To them, the court's ruling felt like validation. It was as if an outside authority had stepped in and said, "Something isn't right here, and we're putting a stop to it." Even if they weren't the ones who initiated the investigation, they understood exactly why it had come to this. Witnesses in the courtroom could almost sense the chasm widening by the second. On one side, Kody and Robyn, whispering frantically, their physical language defensive and shut down. On the other, Janelle and Christine, seated with a kind of restrained composure that comes from sensing the power dynamics have just shifted. Meri sat between the two groups, literally and figuratively. Although she and Kody had been estranged for years, she hadn't entirely taken sides with Christine or Janelle. However, in that instant, she looked a lot more comfortable than Robyn. What made this so explosive was the background to it. The monetary disagreements didn't start overnight, the outcome of years of choices which made some members of the family feel like they were left on the outside. When the Brown family originally started living their plural marriage in the limelight, equality and shared resources were the focus. Over the years, however, it became more obvious that some households, specifically Robyn's, were reaping more benefits. Christine once suggested that she felt her children were being low-priority needs. Janelle had complained about being asked to contribute financially without always getting the returns in her own household. So when the judge froze Kody's assets, it wasn't about money. It was about years of seeming favoritism and inequality finally catching up to him. Back in court,
Robyn's attitude was turning from desperation to desperation. She leaned forward again, speaking in a muted but urgent voice to Kody, who nodded simply with short, clipped responses.
She looked around at the room, definitely sensitive to the stares directed at her. Her generally smooth confidence appeared to break down when she fidgeted with her jacket, changed seats, and nibbled her lip. To observers, it was clear Robyn was shaken like never before. Kody, not yet cracking a smile, did his best not to look straight at Janelle or Christine, but tension between he and Robyn was becoming more apparent. Each whispered conversation had a subtext of fear, and each nervous look over at the judge's bench appeared to beseech some kind of turnabout that was not forthcoming. The court hearing concluded without additional decisions being made that day, but the exit from the courtroom told the whole story. Robyn held on to Kody's arm, talking quickly as they made their way out. Janelle and Christine strolled side by side, their speech soft but their demeanor significantly easier than when they'd arrived. Meri trailed behind, not entirely committed to either party, but observing the changing dynamic with curiosity. Media and spectators waited outside, cameras at the ready. Robyn shielded her face, refusing to meet eyes, while Kody bulldozed past questions. Meanwhile, Christine provided a faint smile and a courteous no comment, which only added fuel to the rumors about how she actually felt. There was more than just another argument in the long history of the Brown family. This was a turning point. Kody and Robyn had been running the show as the core unit of the family for years, making decisions that tended to leave everyone else out. But with the court intervening and freezing assets, their grip was lost, at least temporarily. The rift between Robyn and the rest of the family wasn't emotional anymore. It was financial and legal. And in a family where money had been a source of tension for years, that kind of turn could be impossible to heal. Robyn's panic was not only about losing access to money, it was about losing the status of being the most stable and powerful. For Janelle and Christine, the freeze was a leveling of the field. For Meri, it was a reminder that even the most secure places in the family can fall apart. To see how Kody Brown found himself sitting on the couch, watching his money empire get shut down by the court, we need to rewind way back and explore the long, knotty history of money, distrust, and the fissures in a once unified family. This wasn't something that overnight, it was the culmination of years of simmering tension, hushed accusations, and the gradual disintegration of relationships once held together by faith, love, and trust, or appearances thereof. Even before the courtroom bombshell, those in the know report there were signs that something was amiss in the Brown family finances. It started out quietly, overdue payments here, unexpected shifts in real estate ownership there. Fans of Sister Wives began noticing things too. The family's lavish spending, frequent moves, and expensive projects didn't seem to match the reality of their income. Behind the closed doors of Brownstone, Kody liked to control the family finances. Although each wife had her own account, large amounts routinely found their way into Kody's hands for the good of the family. That meant he got to decide how money was spent. But that's where things went awry. Some of the wives felt that the good of the family was code for the good of Kody and Robyn. Christine, with her bright smile but incendiary candor, began questioning why was so much money invested in Robyn's house. Why did Kody feel compelled to make large purchases for her family, while Christine's and Janelle's were set aside? Janelle, typically level-headed and diplomatic, finally entered the fray. She'd sat by while Kody invested time, energy, and money into Robyn's universe and her own financial projects, such as renovating her property or investing in her business ventures, were rebuffed. Their issue wasn't with spending, it was with trust. The wives desired open books, and Kody was evasive. His responses tended to reduce to, "Don't worry, I have a plan." The tension reached a boiling point over Coyote Pass, the large parcel of land the family purchased in Arizona. It was intended to be the Brown family's grand vision, a place where every wife would have her own house, all unified in an intimate community. But rather than breaking ground and constructing houses, the land remained untouched for years. In the meantime, the property taxes accrued, and the wives also saw that Kody appeared to be redirecting money in ways they didn't comprehend. Some members accused Kody of making the land a bargaining tool for money, perhaps reassigning ownership percentages and values to benefit some individuals, particularly Robyn. Others speculated that he may have been looking to sell portions of it behind closed doors. Though these were mere suspicions, they fueled a fire that was already burning vigorously. Matters were further complicated when Kody divorced Meri, paperwork-wise, that is to marry Robyn legally. Legally, this was so that he could adopt her kids. But the legal action had a monetary side benefit. Specific assets now could be passed along or titled differently. Christine and Janelle started questioning if this was all part of a bigger trend. Was Kody shifting money so that if any wife left, she would take less with her? When Christine did divorce Kody spiritually and financially separated herself from him, she intimated in public that she didn't trust the way finances were being managed. She wasn't alone. Janelle said the same things in interviews, suggesting that somebody was keeping some things hidden at the expense of others. These rumors eventually reached the wrong ears, or the right ones depending on your perspective. Legal officials heard about potential asset hiding. Although the specifics are sealed, several reports indicate that somebody, perhaps a former family member, made official complaints about Kody's financial activities. From there, things moved quickly. Investigators started sifting through bank statements, deeds to property, and tax returns. They searched for huge cash withdrawals, sudden account-to-account transfers, and shifts in who owned what assets that could signal attempts to launder money. What they did find wasn't necessarily evidence of guilt, though it was enough to raise serious red flags. Criminally freezing an individual's assets is not something one does lightly. The courts typically resort to this only when they feel there's a genuine concern that funds might be relocated, concealed, or dissipated before the case concludes. In the case of Kody, the judge obviously felt the need to intervene. Freezing all the accounts, personal, joint, and business, kept no large amounts of money from disappearing before the truth was revealed. That meant members of the family could no longer touch certain funds without a court order. Even normal expenses now needed to clear the courts. This not only embarrassed Kody, but also placed tremendous stress on everyday life for all concerned. When word of the freeze broke, fans were split. Some felt it was long overdue justice, particularly after years of seeing what they perceived as favoritism and manipulation. Others felt it was an overreach, maintaining that family conflicts shouldn't extend to court unless absolutely necessary. Social media ignited with arguments. Former fans shared clips of Kody dismissing Christine's and Janelle's concerns, calling them emotional or unrealistic. Now those same moments were being replayed as evidence of deeper financial control. Inside the family, the emotional impact was massive. For Kody, the freeze wasn't just a legal setback, it was a personal attack on his identity as the provider and leader. For decades he had controlled the family narrative, finances, and future. And now strangers in suits were dictating to him what he could and couldn't do with his own money. Robyn was devastated by the news, apparently sobbing uncontrollably when she understood that their home budget was at the mercy of the court. She felt it was an attack not only on Kody, but on the security of her family. Meanwhile, Christine and Janelle felt validated. This was the first time in years that someone had intervened to make Kody accountable. Though they weren't outwardly celebrating, according to friends, there was a whispered sense of relief. This case is not so much about money, it's about power. In multiple marriages, financial control can hold the key to everything from living conditions to emotional status. For years, Kody's power had run unopposed in this regard. But now that the court is involved, this equilibrium has been altered. Kody is no longer the only one making decisions. And that is more than the frozen accounts, perhaps the biggest hit to his reputation and influence. The freeze raised questions among fans and family members. What did the investigators actually uncover? Is this about secret assets, taxes, or something more? And maybe the question of greatest burning intensity, was someone within the family a tipper of the authorities? Until the court case lays bare more details, people will continue to speculate. But one thing is certain, this isn't just a page in the Brown family history. This is a turning point that may redefine their future forever. The courtroom had been cleared out hours before. But the wave effects of the judge's ruling were only just starting to overwhelm the Brown family. Kody Brown, the self-assured invincible head of sister wives once upon a time, now found himself at a fork in the road, his economic influence stripped away and his future in doubt. But this wasn't about the money anymore. This was about loyalty, control, and the dissolution of a television-watching family dynasty constructed before camera lenses for more than a decade. So what follows? Let's summarize. Freezing assets is seldom the final nail in the coffin. It's just the start. The courts moved to freeze Kody's bank accounts, holdings on property, and business earnings is a sign that an all-out probe is about to ensue. Legal insiders say the process may take months, even years, particularly if several accounts, businesses, and properties are involved. The lawyers working on the case will now sift through each transaction, each deposit, withdrawal, and wire transfer Kody made in the past few years. And if one transaction appears questionable, something that can be read as a try to conceal or cover up money, the repercussions could be drastic. This is more than a pay a fine and forget matter. If detectives suspect that Kody was deliberately attempting to hide assets, they can charge him with fraud, contempt of court, or other white-collar offenses. And if so, prison time is not ruled out. While the lawsuits simmer behind the scenes, Kody is also engaged in another equally perilous battle. The battle for public opinion. The Sister Wives brand for years had been built on the concept of a large, non-traditional family living life as one. But things have shifted. Christine departed, Janelle disengaged, Meri disentangled herself, and Robyn became Kody's most intimate and trusted companion. Fans have for years assumed that Robyn and her kids received more economic assistance than anyone else. And now that the court really is saying, we need to keep an eye on where this money is headed, those fan theories no longer sound like rumor but reality. This leaves Kody in a no-win situation. If he makes a public statement, he might say something that will come back and hurt him in court. And if he keeps quiet, then the imagination of the public will fill in the blanks, most likely with the worst possible assumptions. Among the largest questions now, where are the other wives? Christine has made no bones about the fact that she's moved on. She's doing well in her new life, enjoying her fiancé and looking back only occasionally. In her eyes, this case is a matter of justice, a cosmic balancing act, of sorts after decades of feeling economically cheated. But Christine also realizes that if this probe goes deep enough, it could turn up money tracks that would involve her as well, particularly if past joint accounts are part of the investigation. Janelle has never been the type to get riled up, but financial arguments have been at the center of her problems with Kody for years. She's probably relieved to see the court give credibility to her longtime complaints, but she also needs to watch out. She's always prized her economic independence, and she'll want to ensure the investigation doesn't interfere with her own stability. Meri is still the wild card. She's been on the outside of the family for years, but so are her business dealings potentially at risk if they're even tangentially linked to Kody's finances. Meri is a master of playing the long game, and presently her silence might be her best tool. Robyn is in a whole other boat though. Her household is most financially entwined with Kody. If investigators find that large sums of money were diverted into her house at the expense of the other wives, she might find herself dragged into the case, not merely as a witness, but perhaps as an individual with exposure of her own under the law. TLC has remained silent so far, but behind the scenes, executives are likely monitoring every turn and twist. The reality is controversy sells, and this plot would gain the show some of its highest ratings ever. But there's a chance. If Kody's legal issues get worse, production would get complicated. Court dates, legal limitations, and the potential for criminal charges would all have to be handled delicately. TLC would also have to choose how much of the truth to reveal. Too little, and viewers will lose interest. Too much, and they run the risk of alienating the very people that they're documenting. Some insiders speculate that TLC may even shift gears, centering on Christine, Janelle, and the rest of the family members and maintaining Kody's legal issues as a back-burner storyline until there is resolution. Others expect the network to double down on the drama as the greatest meltdown of the Brown family. For Kody, the stakes are as high as they can get. Should he lose the case, he may be compelled to surrender a large share of his holdings to the court, pay back any individuals claiming financial damages, be subject to long-term limits on his financial activity,
And possibly most hurtful of all, he would stand to lose whatever remains of his reputation. In reality TV land, a public fall from grace is difficult to overcome. Fans might still tune in out of morbid curiosity, but restoring trust, particularly with his own family, would be all but impossible. When Sister Wives premiered, it offered viewers a glimpse into an alternative lifestyle based on love, faith, and harmony. Now that image has been shifted to courtrooms, asset freezes, and hushed accusations. For Kody's kids, this moment will probably inform how they perceive both their dad and the family legacy for the remainder of their lives. Some will likely come to his defense, thinking the court is acting unfairly. Others will perceive this as validation of ongoing worries about his priorities. Either way, the fallout will not just affect the current moment, it will reverberate for years, maybe even decades. Maybe the most ironic turn of events in all of this is that Kody, a man who has based his entire life on control over his marriages, over his home, over his money, has now embarked on a chapter where control is the one thing he can no longer have. Every choice, from whether he can shop for groceries to whether he can sell a plot of land, will now pass through the court's approval. And for someone accustomed to making decisions, that kind of scrutiny may be punishment enough. Now, waiting is all that is left. The court process will lumber along in its own slow fashion, and the Brown family will languish in limbo. Some will spend this time readying themselves, emotionally, legally, and financially. Others will sit back and watch and see if Kody is going to actually face the consequences they feel he has gotten away with for so long. For viewers, the next installment is impossible to forecast. Will Kody come out of this scandal vindicated, his assets intact, his reputation restored? Or will he be another celebrity cautionary tale of greed, success, and pride leading to a very public collapse? One thing is guaranteed: this tale is far from complete. And when the next turn of events comes, it may just be even more sensational than the last.